Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You are watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. President Biden's laying out his strategy to fight gun violence. We're live with the 5-part plan. Britney Spears breaking her silence to end a toxic conservatorship with her father. The court hearing years in the making. And millions of Americans quitting their jobs. Companies now offering some pretty big perks to get them back to work. But will it be enough? We start today with the president's fight against gun violence. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joining me now. So, Mike, the White House is out with a 5-point plan. Tell us about it. And what is the president saying about keeping our communities safe this summer?
Well, Allison, what the White House has been looking at is a real spike in violent crime over the past 18 months. And they're attributing a lot of that to the pandemic and some of the economic dislocation that happened because of it. And so what the president's doing, and he's running a little late today, not the first time I've said that, but he's going to be discussing sort of the main bullet points of what the administration is going to be doing. And some of it has to do with executive action. A big focus of that is using the power of the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to really clamp down on licensed dealers, licensed firearm dealers, to make sure that they are doing the background checks, all the other pieces that are a part of existing law. They're also allowing states and local governments to use money from the COVID relief law that was passed in March to hire more police. We think so often of the debate about whether to defund the police. This is President Biden saying we need to hire more police. We need to invest in our law enforcement to beef up our forces. And then there are things like expanding the summer programs, internships, job programs to try to take people off the streets and give them other things to do, frankly, especially in cities where that tends to be a driver of some of the violence. The last point, and it's an interesting one, has to do with providing a path toward employment for those who have been previously incarcerated. Biden talked so much about this during the course of the campaign that, as he put it, when you got out of jail, all you got was $20 and a bus ticket. So he wants to do more to help those formerly incarcerated individuals to find a pathway back to employment rather than back to a life of crime.
So, Mike, I have to ask you about the F word. Senate Republicans used the filibuster to block a voting rights bill last night. What's the White House saying about that today?
Yeah, well, we've talked about the vice president, her role in leading the charge on voting rights. She presided over that Senate vote, and what she also talked about being a rather limited actual debate in the chamber about it. And then today she held a roundtable with some voting rights activists in which she talked about her reaction to it and some steps forward. Take a listen to what she had to say.
The fact is, our fight does not look very different, I think, than it did yesterday. It's about what we can do to uplift all the voices around stopping legislation that is in process, but also addressing what must happen in those states where legislation has already passed to empower voters and to navigate a system that has been tampered with. The president and I are undeterred, and we are committed to this.
So we talked about this yesterday, right? Some of the outside progressive groups that are frustrated that the president himself wasn't more vocal about this. He issued a statement last night, which tantalizingly said he will have more to say about this next week. We don't know what exactly that's going to look like, but we know, based on what the vice president said there seems to be a focus not necessarily on legislation here in Washington, but efforts that could happen in the states, especially to counter the Republican efforts to dial back voting rights and put pressure on them in state houses rather than here in Washington.
All right, what a great tease, Mike. We will stay tuned. Also today, President Biden spoke at former Senator John Warner's funeral. They served together in the Senate. How did the president remember his former colleague?
The president today playing a role he plays so often as consoler in chief. I've covered I don't know how many eulogies that he has given. He's so good at them. And he talked especially about the relationship that he had with a Republican senator, obviously on different sides of the aisle, but they found common purpose in doing what they both thought was right and crossing the aisle from time to time. Take a listen to part of what the president had to say.
While we represented different political parties, I can say without hesitation, John was a man of conscience, character, and honor, with a deep commitment to God and country. In the battle for the soul of America today, John Warner is a reminder of what we can do when we come together as one nation.
The president also said something he said on Memorial Day as well, that empathy is the fuel of democracy. And in a personal note, he said that when Senator Warner endorsed him last year, obviously a big deal for a Republican longtime senator like him to endorse a Democrat presidential candidate, he said, it gave me the confidence to know not that I could win, but that I could do the job. So a really nice tribute to his former colleague.
Mike, one more for you on the vice president. We know she's heading to the U.S.-Mexico border on Friday. What do you know about her visit?
Not much, Allison. And in fact, this was a pretty sort of abrupt announcement that the vice president's office made today. And we can't help but notice that the announcement of her travel, something that they really pushed back on the idea that she even needed to go to the border when her focus is on the migration and the root causes of Central American countries where she has traveled. But this announcement followed pretty quickly after we learned that the former president, Donald Trump, is going to be heading down to the border as well, joined by a number of Republican congressmen. So the fact that this was announced only a few days before she's going to be heading down there, she's going to be in El Paso, joined by the Homeland Security Secretary, I think speaks to some of the political pressure. Of course, the White House downplaying that today. They said she always said that she was going to be going to the border at the appropriate time, and now they think it's the appropriate time.
All right, Mike, we will stay tuned for that one as well. If you don't know much about that visit yet, there isn't much to know. I know you'll tell us as soon as you do. Thanks so much.
You got it.
As you know, my first directive as Secretary of Defense, issued on my first full day in the office, was to service leadership about sexual assault. In the coming days, I'll present to President Biden my specific recommendations about the Commission's finding, but I know enough at this point to say that I fully support removing the prosecution of sexual assaults and related crimes from the military chain of command. And we must treat this as the leadership issue that it is.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on the Hill today, hours after endorsing a major change in how the military addresses sexual assault and domestic violence, assigning those cases to independent military lawyers and taking them out of the chain of command. NBC News correspondent Courtney Cubie joining me now from the Pentagon. Courtney, Defense Secretary Austin saying he has specific recommendations for President Biden. What are some of those?
So one of them is taking the prosecution of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and some related crimes like domestic violence out of the chain of command. What exactly does that mean? Right now, if there's a case or an allegation of one of these crimes, the commander of a unit is the one who will investigate and then decide whether a case should go forward for prosecution. What Secretary Austin now wants to do is to appoint a special prosecutor or provide a special prosecutor who would look at these cases in going forward and decide whether they should go forward for a court-martial. So this isn't something that just will be done overnight. The Pentagon and the White House are going to have to work with Congress to change the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They actually have to change the law that dictates how these cases go forward. This is something that's probably going to take some time, Allison. It's not going to happen overnight.
Courtney, the president supported this move back when he was running for office. With his backing, what happens next?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we fully expect that the White House will be on board with this. The reality is, I don't think that Secretary Austin would have announced it unless they knew that the White House was on board with it. And, you know, as you mentioned, candidate Biden spoke about this. There's also a ton of support on this for the Hill. This is something that some members of Congress, Congresswoman Jackie Speer and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, they've been pushing for this for years. But what's really changed in the last several months is now there are members of the other party, there are Republicans, who are also voicing support for this change, among them Senator Joni Ernst. So there is momentum for this to change. The question is what Secretary Austin today enough for them? Senator Gillibrand and Congresswoman Speer, they wanted to make this even bigger. They wanted to take not just sexual assault and harassment, but they wanted to take pretty much anything that wasn't a military crime or military-related crime out of the chain of command and turn this over to someone who would be more of an independent voice on it. Secretary Austin did not go that far. He basically stuck with the recommendations that came out of this independent review that's been ongoing here for about the last 90 days at the Pentagon. They found that some of these additional some things that are sort of often tied to sexual harassment or sexual assault, that those cases could be taken out of chain of command, but it's still keeping many of the other crimes like murder. Those will still stay in the chain of command. That doesn't go as far as some of these members of Congress wanted.
All right, it looks like it is going to have some success, at least. We'll see to what extent things change. Courtney, thanks so much for the update.
Thanks.
A former high school cheerleader winning a major free speech case in the Supreme Court. Just one of the decisions the justices handed down this morning. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now from Washington, D.C. Pete, this Pennsylvania teen was suspended for dropping F-bombs in a Snapchat rant about the school back in 2017. Today, the court ruled 8-1 in her favor. Tell us about their decision.
Well, it said that the nation's public schools don't have a free hand to punish students for what they say off campus. A lower court had ruled that schools can never take action against off-campus speech. This ruling doesn't go that far. It does say exceptions to be worked out in the future, though, would be limited. But you're right, it's a victory for Brandy Levy. She was the 9th grader at a Pennsylvania high school. She was punished for a message she posted to Snapchat one Saturday at a convenience store far away from campus, after discovering that she didn't make the varsity cheerleading team and would remain on the junior varsity squad. She posted a Snapchat message that said, F school, F softball, F cheer, F everything, using the full word, not just the initial. She was suspended from the junior varsity team for her entire sophomore year. And today the Supreme Court said the punishment did not fit the crime.
Pete, we thank you for using just the abbreviation there and not her full Snapchat post. This decision doesn't go as far, though, as protecting all off-campus expression. Could you explain that a little bit?
Right. The court suggested that schools could take action against student expression in some categories, which it said it remained to be worked out in future cases. But it made it pretty clear that student speech wouldn't be protected, would be subject to punishment if it amounted to threats or if it was bullying or cheating on a test or violating the rules for extracurricular activities, for example.
Pete, I understand the Supreme Court also issued a blow to unions trying to organize California farm workers. Could you tell us about that decision and what sort of broader implications it could have?
Right. This was also a constitutional question. Brandy Levy's was a First Amendment case. This one comes from the Fifth Amendment, which says that the government can't take private property without just compensation. And the Supreme Court said that's what was going on when union organizers under a California rule were allowed to enter the private property of agricultural growers for up to 120 days a year to talk about joining the union and trying to unionize the farm workers. Now, the rule was limited. It said they could only do this in discrete periods. They could only go in the morning, after work in the evening, or during lunch. But still, the Supreme Court said this did amount to a government taking, usurping the private property owner's rights. This was a 6-3 decision. The 3 dissenters said it's not a taking, it's just a regulation.
All right, 2 constitutional rulings today. Pete, thanks so much for walking us through them.
You bet.
We can disagree on education, on healthcare, on any other damn thing you want to disagree with, but you cannot disagree about whether or not all Americans have the right to vote. And I'm tired of talking about Mr. Manchin and Ms. Sinema. You know, we have got to do what we can to bring people together. The American people, I think all over this country, understand that now is the time to act.
Senator Bernie Sanders passionate about voting rights this year and throwing a little bit of shade at his Democratic colleagues, Manchin and Sinema. Let's get to Capitol Hill correspondent, or I should say NBC News national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor. Sorry about that, Sahil, who is on Capitol Hill. I've got myself straight now. Sahil, what's next for Democrats and voting rights? I understand Senator Klobuchar is scheduling hearings, but what does that do if they can't get a bill passed?
Right, Allison. Democrats say this is not the end of the fight. They say, and let's put up a tweet from Senator Klobuchar here. She says this is just the beginning, that Democrats will continue to fight for voting rights and they're not ready to give up yet. That message has been carried by Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, as well as Vice President Harris. But the reality is they don't have any good options here. There are 2 paths to getting voting rights legislation passed through the Senate. The first is abolishing the filibuster that requires all 50 Democrats. They don't have the votes to do that. The second is getting 10 Republicans on board, and they don't have close to 10. And the reason is that most Republicans, the vast majority of them, believe Congress should not step in at all and do anything major on voting rights. They're happy to leave that to states. They argue that what's going on in states like Georgia and Texas, the restrictive voting laws, are okay. They don't have a problem with that. So there is no Venn diagram of overlap between the parties. The plan C, potentially, Allison, if there was one, would be to use the reconciliation process. That's the budget vehicle that is not subject to a filibuster, and try to stuff some changes in there to voting rules. That would be very difficult, of course, to get through Senate rules, which says they have to be directly related to taxing and spending. So frankly, Democrats are stuck on this one.
So House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is deciding whether to form a House committee to investigate the January 6th Capitol attack. And there was a lot of confusion about this yesterday evening. What is the timeline there? What kind of committee are we talking about here? Do we have some more clarity today?
Allison, Speaker Pelosi told my colleague Haley Talbot earlier today that there was no timeline in terms of expecting an announcement today. Take a listen to what exactly she had to say about that.
Do you expect to make an announcement on the Select Committee on January 6th today? No.
And that's quite straightforward. Right. There's the Speaker not exactly saying when to expect an announcement, but the reality is that the issue is moving in the direction of a select committee. The January 6th Bipartisan Commission has been filibustered by Republicans in the Senate, and Plan B all along was most likely the creation of a select committee in the House where Democrats can centralize the investigation of this with subpoena power themselves. But as you just heard the Speaker said there, she's not making that announcement just yet. TBD on when that happens.
Sahil, I know you've been spending a lot of time in the Hill playing the game WWMD, What Will Manchin Do? He now says he's open to a filibuster-proof package on so-called human infrastructure, talking about things like investing in childcare, community college, paid leave. So what does that mean for Democrats who are trying to get an infrastructure bill passed?
I spoke to Senator Manchin as he was walking off the Senate floor yesterday after casting that vote on the voting rights bill, and he opened the door more widely than I've ever heard him before on the issue of budget reconciliation. That is the economic stimulus and safety net package that President Biden has called for that can pass without any Republican support, passed the same way as the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill did. And he said he is open to using the reconciliation process if it means changing the tax code to be more competitive, if it means making investments in what he called human infrastructure, just echoing President Biden's phrase there for investments in things like childcare and paid leave and other safety net expansions that the president has called for. So Manchin very much opening the door to use that process, even as he continues to pursue a bipartisan deal on physical infrastructure with Republicans. The increasing sense among Democrats is that it's not an either or, they want it to be a both and. They want to do a small bipartisan deal, but also a bigger Democrats only package that addresses progressive and other Democratic priorities. And there is a growing sense of negotiation between the two wings of the Democratic Party that they should allow both of these to proceed and let the members get what they want.
Sahil, today we learned a group of House Republicans will join former President Trump and take a trip to the border next week. What do you know about that trip?
A big part of this effort is led by Jim Banks, the Republican chairman of the Republican Study Committee. That's a group of conservatives in the House of Representatives. They are planning a trip with the former president to the border, and this comes as Republicans have placed a heavy premium on the issue of immigration in their messaging. They argue that President Biden's reversal of some of the strict Trump-era immigration policies have been the cause of the recent surge of migrants at the border. Now, the Biden White House strongly disagrees with that. They say there are root issues here at play in Central America that have very little to do with anything the White House is doing, and that these migration patterns ebb and flow over time. But for Republicans, this is a messaging issue that they really want to focus on. It fires up their base, and it is a tough one for the Biden White House to grapple with at this moment, Allison.
All right, Sahil Kapoor on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much. Britney Spears breaking her silence today in court. The pop star publicly testifying for the first time against her father and his control over her assets and her life. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas is outside the courthouse in Los Angeles. Oh, look at that crowd. And criminal defense attorney and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is also with us, with just a little bit less of a crowd. So, Guad, I'll start with you. Britney testifying today remotely after a 13-year conservatorship. What are we expecting her to say?
Allison, of course, people waiting for her to speak. This is the first time she's going to speak publicly. It's been 13 years of success with her career. She's had 4 albums. She had the very successful residency in Las Vegas. But her attorney has presented documents in courts saying that she does not want to be under her father's control. We don't know exactly what she's going to say, but what we do know is that she doesn't want her father to be a conservator. Now, there's a lot of details in this legal battle because it's not only her father that's been appointed as a conservator. Of course, there's a bank that controls her financial assets. Jody Montgomery is a co-conservator, making decisions on her safety, making decisions on her personal matters. So today would be the first time she will speak, and everyone is eager. As you mentioned, we have dozens of fans, maybe more than 100 fans that have been showed up, part of this Free Britney movement, waiting to hear from her in court, Allison.
Oh, and they came with the T-shirts, the signs, and the props, full force there. So, Danny, we don't expect a ruling today, but tell us what the judge is actually considering here and how Britney could potentially persuade the court to side with her.
This is a conservatorship case like no other probably in the history of conservatorships, because this is a system that is normally designed for folks who have severe developmental disabilities. They're unable to care for themselves. It's not normally used for a mega pop star with unparalleled success in her industry, who is, as we've just heard, had a residency in Las Vegas, who is by every measure incredibly successful. So what's interesting here is for the 13 years of this conservatorship, Britney Spears has never explicitly demanded that her father be removed or that the conservatorship be dissolved, either of her estate or of her as a person. But today is really interesting because it really is the first time we're hearing from her what exactly it is that she wants. And if she wants to get rid of her father, the kind of implicit understanding there is that she may want to get rid of her father, but keep the conservatorship. Maybe she's happy with this kind of guidance and stability that the conservatorship offers. Who knows?
So, Danny, you mentioned this is a conservatorship case like no other. According to recent court filings, her dad, Jamie Spears, is looking for $16,000 a month for his conservatorship services. I'm not exactly sure entirely what that includes, plus $2,000 a month for office space. Is that within the range of normal, or does this give the appearance that he's going after her cash?
Don't forget also, I think her attorney's been billing it over $30,000 a month. And as an attorney, I wholly endorse billing $30,000 a month for an attorney. But for Britney Spears, for Jamie Spears, I should say, that look, a court will look at whether or not it's reasonable in light of the work involved. Of course, that amount is completely abnormal for your regular run-of-the-mill conservatorship, but this is anything but that. This is breaking all the normal rules.
Danny, maybe we should get into the conservatorship business. It certainly looks lucrative. So, Guad, I got to ask you, Britney fans have been pretty vocal since the documentaries about her aired this year. We've all seen the Free Britney T-shirts and hashtag Free Britney on social media. What are you hearing from fans out there today from the crowd behind you? What have they been saying?
So they keep repeating Free Britney. In fact, today they sent out the call for any Britney fan to come out. They had extra signs. Anyone that wanted to show up can just pick up a sign and join this movement. And I'd like to note that Britney's attorney did mention in court that she doesn't want to perform while her father is in control of her life, which is interesting, right? For a fan, they would want her to perform again. We know that residency in Las Vegas gathered a lot of fans. They were expecting her to stay, sign another year, which she didn't. So she hasn't officially said it, but her attorney did say that she doesn't want to perform until her father is no longer in control. The fans here are showing up as I speak. I can see a few more walking up with signs, waiting for this public speaking, for this public hearing where Britney will be speaking in public for the first time. Allison.
All right, Guad and Danny, thanks so much. Great to have you both with us, and can't wait to hear what she has to say. Appreciate it. Childcare, part of President Biden's infrastructure proposal. Communities want facility upgrades and competitive pay for employees after so many centers closed down during the pandemic. MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing visited a St. Louis neighborhood and spoke with two childcare providers.
Good job.
Happy kids on the playground at Beginning Futures Learning Center. But in this tough St. Louis neighborhood, Miss Rochelle would love to have an indoor play space.
Very often that we have to break on the playground from gunfire and return to the building.
Can I show you?
President Biden's infrastructure proposal includes $25 billion to upgrade childcare facilities like this and build new ones in underserved areas. They're desperately needed. COVID shuttered more than a quarter of childcare centers by the end of last year. Those that are up and running face a debilitating staffing shortage from a competitive COVID job market.
Imagine the entry-level pay to early childhood programs is $8, $9 an hour when you can go to Target and make $15. And what's making it really hard nowadays is a lot of companies are offering sign-on bonuses. Church's Chicken or McDonald's will give you a $500 sign-on bonus, and I can't compete with that.
Black and Hispanic communities like Union City, New Jersey were especially hard hit by the closings, exactly the places where parents often didn't have the ability to work from home.
And we said, we're only going to probably be for 2 weeks or so. And here we were a year and a half later.
Union City is open again, but without competitive salaries, an estimated 20,000 other centers nationwide may never reopen. So childcare advocates insist that money for brick and mortar alone just doesn't add up. Because without higher salaries, those new and improved buildings won't have the teachers to staff them.
The taxpayers need to understand that education for a young child is crucial, is a key component for the future of our children.
And Chris Jansing joins me live now. Chris, it is terrific to see you. Those are some staggering numbers in your story, though. 20,000 child care centers may never reopen again. I mean, you just think of how essential child care is, right? This summer when kids are out of school, then this fall when many parents may actually have to go back into the office. What is the plan for some of these centers that are struggling to hire staff as they wait to see what happens with the infrastructure bill?
That's absolutely the key question. And what a lot of them tell me, Allison, is there is no plan B, because if you're in a state where they actually license daycare centers, then there are strict student to daycare worker or teacher ratios. And if they can't meet them, they can't function. Add to that a shortage of substitute teachers. So if one of your regular daycare providers is sick or has their own emergency at home, you don't have anybody to back them up. So there's concern that without the federal money, and in some instances, like what you saw in New Jersey, states are chipping in, but very few have the budget to do it. So without money, they're afraid that those huge numbers of daycare centers that have already closed are going to be added to, and that could be disastrous in the fall.
Chris, the other thing that really struck me, those safety concerns for the kids playing outside in St. Louis, it's just heartbreaking. They have to come inside because of gunfire. What else do these centers need besides safe indoor spaces?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that many of those indoor spaces aren't safe in and of themselves. They may be safe from gunfire, but they may have environmental concerns. One of the things we learned through COVID, right, Allison, is that we're all concerned about ventilation, particularly in older buildings. Many of those older buildings don't have adequate air conditioning in the summer or adequate heat in the winter. And besides all those structural problems that we see in many daycare centers, much like we see in schools across the country, there are simple things like new books, chairs, tables that are considered to be safe, anything that the children play with, newer toys. And so it's a very broad list of things to do. But many of those daycare centers, there's so much concern about them. That's exactly why there's a feeling that what has to happen is new, improved daycare centers have to be built. And if you think of just one thing, if you're sending your child to a small or a home daycare center, are there clear lines of sight to your child, or are they blocked? So there's a whole plethora of issues that have to be addressed. But right now, and this is the key part, that money is in the Biden Democrat bill. It is not in the compromise bill, the bipartisan bill for infrastructure.
Oh, so no doubt they will be watching how that one goes so closely. Chris, thanks so much for your reporting. It's always wonderful to have you on.
Thanks, Allison.
It is time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Today's theme, Fearless. It's the title of Rebecca Minkoff's new book. She's a fashion designer and entrepreneur who's navigated the pandemic. She's also a mom of 3, and now she's an author. And you most definitely have seen her handbags before. Rebecca joins us live now, and I am so thrilled that she is here. Rebecca, thank you for being with us. The book is brand new, out this month. Fearless, the new rules for unlocking creativity, courage, and success. So let's start with being fearless and surviving the pandemic, which you talk about in the book. Your brand took a huge hit. You say roughly half your business was gone. How did you get through that?
You know, we called this daily, we had an executive call every day. We called it day trading. All of a sudden, we went from 900 points of sale to just my website. And so we really had to figure out fast how to pivot and how to grow the fruits from our own garden and survive off them. So it was nothing short of a miracle that we stayed in business and actually ended the year up over 10% of the prior year. But it took the entire team's blood, sweat, and many tears to pull off what we did.
Oh, I can only imagine. And congratulations to you guys for putting the work in to get there. I know a lot of people threw in the towel because the task just was so daunting. You give a lot of great advice in your book. I absolutely loved reading it. And one thing I really enjoyed in particular, you say, each time you have a setback or a situation that seems uncomfortable, stare it in the face. You talk about so many humorous situations, but serious situations about personally failing over and over. And you say you've got to have resilience. I think so many people, particularly working women, may feel like they've been through a lot of setbacks this year. What other advice would you give them about getting through it and coming out on the other side?
I think that sometimes success is simply being able to keep going. It's putting one foot in front of the other. And while risks are scary, we have to take risks. And I view failure now as, what did I learn from this, right? It's not something I go under my desk and hide from the world. And so I think if we can reframe failure as a learning opportunity, know that taking risks and sticking our necks out, the cavalry might not come for us. We have to do it ourselves. And I look to so many incredible examples of women, whether it was the right to vote or the right to our bodies. Women had to stick their necks out and they achieved forward progress. So I think it's on us to continue to do it, no matter how hard it is, because it's going to be hard. That's just life.
Yeah. I love what a hustler you are. You spent the last $1,600 you had. You found a guy with a factory who made your first morning after bag, which you are now quite famous for, and it has several iterations. Your advice for young people or anyone starting out who just has a few dollars in the bank but has a really big dream?
So I just want to be clear. That was my last $1,600. I did not have any savings, no cushion. I was not even able to pay rent really in New York City. That was it. So I think my advice to you is you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to meet and connect with lots of people that can help you. And I say in the book, ask for what you want and be really specific at it. Don't ask for help. Get laser focused. If you have the opportunity to be in a room with someone who can help you, you better go at them with that thing that's going to help you get to the next level of success. And people are out there. They love to help. And then when you can turn around and do that for someone else, it pays it forward in a big way.
One of the keys to your success is that you've really taken the time to get to know your customer, whether it was at sample sales in the early days or more recently through social media and networking events. So I have to ask, what are you hearing from women now? What are they looking for? What are they interested in buying in this post-pandemic world? And any advice for those of us who are thinking, damn, I've been in nothing but sweats. What the hell do I wear now?
Well, I actually got to host my first live event with Books and Books at the Bal Harbor shops yesterday, and I got to meet over 100 women, and they are ready to get out. They're ready to start learning how to walk again in heels, little ones. But I think flowy, easy, comfort dresses are key right now. Again, we're still never going to get out of our sweats completely, but I think it's time to go out, and you can still do that with easy jersey, flowing dresses, and a tiny, tiny heel.
You're making me so happy because we're showing images of your collection. You're wearing tie-dye. I totally got into the tie-dye sweats vibe over the pandemic. You're saying, and you're wearing it, so it must still be okay?
Oh, it's okay. I have a closet full of it. I could wear it every day for the next month and never have anything else. So go crazy with tie-dye. It's a summer of tie-dye.
Thank you. When my husband complains that I've been wearing tie-dye for a week, I'm going to say Rebecca Minkoff told me to. Rebecca, thank you for being on, and congrats on the book. It is wonderful. I've already promised to pass it along to some of my girlfriends because I know they'll enjoy it. Thanks for being so inspiring. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
One of the largest labor unions in the U.S. targeting Amazon workers. NBC News reporting the Teamsters are trying to organize Amazon warehouse workers and drivers across the country. NBC News investigative tech editor Olivia Sloan is part of the team covering that story. She joins me now. Olivia, you're reporting the Teamsters are voting tomorrow on a resolution to create and fund a dedicated Amazon division. An associate professor of management and labor relations at Rutgers telling NBC News it's a very strong statement of intent by the Teamsters in terms of the resources they're willing to put into a campaign to organize Amazon workers. So explain this one for us. What kind of resources are we talking about here? And what do you know about the Teamsters strategy?
So traditionally, unions have tried to organize warehouses individually, but the Teamsters have decided that for a company the size of Amazon, it really needs to take a more unified approach across warehouses, and including both the employees at the warehouses and the contracted workforce, including people like delivery drivers. Now, taking this approach means that the union wouldn't be certified through an election run by the National Labor Relations Board, but it would instead use things like collective action, such as walkouts and petitions, to pressure Amazon to voluntarily recognize the union.
Any idea how this vote tomorrow might go? And talk us through, if the resolution passes, what happens next?
Well, this is something that many local Teamsters chapters have already been working on. So it's extremely likely this resolution will pass. If it's adopted, the Teamsters will supply funding and resources to set up this special Amazon division dedicated to helping Amazon workers organize and demand better working conditions.
Unions have not had very much success with Amazon. Most recently, we know this past April, workers at an Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, voted against forming a union. That vote's still being challenged. But could you tell us about how Amazon has really successfully shut down unions for years now? How do they do it?
Well, in Bessemer, Amazon ran a very well-funded union busting campaign. It hired specialist consultants, and it covered the warehouse in posters and signs, including in the bathrooms, encouraging workers to vote no to the union. It also made all the workers attend mandatory meetings where they were warned about how unions are only in it for the money and that they destroyed the direct relationship between employees and management. But I think an even more successful strategy that Amazon has used has been firing several high-profile worker organizers at warehouses across the country. Of course, Amazon has alternative reasons for their firings. It says that they were fired for social distancing or vulgar language violations. But having spoken to dozens of Amazon warehouse workers, the message these firings send is clear. You could lose your job if you try to organize.
Any particular comment or statement from Amazon about this Teamsters push?
Amazon did not respond to a request for comment on this particular Teamsters push, but in the past, when we've talked about organizing at Amazon, it has pointed out that it already pays workers at least $15 per hour, which is well above the minimum wage in many states, and gives them benefits like healthcare and a 401k.
All right, we'll see how this resolution goes tomorrow. Olivia, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
New hope for asylum seekers rejected by the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy. The Department of Homeland Security announcing they can now reapply. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley is here with me now. So, Julia, this Remain in Mexico policy started back in 2019. Do we have a sense of how many migrants could potentially get another shot here and who specifically is eligible?
We do have a sense of that number thanks to data crunched by Syracuse University. They think 34,000, Allison, asylum seekers could now have their chance to try to reapply and get their day in court. These are people who arrived at the border under the Trump administration, were told that they were going to be subjected to the Remain in Mexico policy, that they would have to wait in northern Mexico until their court date. But then largely a lot of these people had their dates canceled because they were ordered in absentia, meaning they did not show up for their dates. And a lot of times it's because they didn't know when or where that would be. They didn't have physical mailing addresses or lawyers to keep up with these cases. So now these cases are being brought back and they may actually have their day in court. We will say that the Biden administration ended that policy when they came in, but today, if you arrive at the border as a new asylum seeker, you are likely not going to get in unless you're an unaccompanied child because those COVID restrictions are still in place. But at least for these people who arrived under the Trump administration pre-COVID, they could now have a shot.
So, Julia, what do we know about where these people are? I mean, could this change just encourage more people to start making the dangerous trip to the border yet again?
I mean, it really shouldn't, because these people are only qualified because they were under that Remain in Mexico policy that doesn't even exist anymore. New asylum seekers would not be eligible for any of this relief at all. But unfortunately, what we do see a lot of times is that smugglers may bend the truth. They may say, look at this. They may be sending out the very news stories that we're publishing on NBCnews.com and sort of retooling them to try to say, look, this means it's time for you to cross the border now. They're letting in all these people. So there is always that fear. And I think that's something that is considered when the administration rolls out policies like this. But they were under a lot of pressure, Allison, to try to hear from these people, because ending this policy meant ending a lot of violence in northern Mexico, where these people were living in tent facilities waiting to get in. But now the next bit of pressure, of course, is coming for the Biden administration to end its own policy that's keeping out so many other migrants and not even giving them that court date.
Julia, speaking of pressure, the White House announcing today that Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to the border this Friday. We know the administration has been taking a lot of heat for not doing enough about the crisis there. Is the trip itself enough to answer some of that criticism, or are there other specific things that immigration advocates and border critics really need to see from her here?
I think it's not enough. I mean, what they really want is an end to these lawsuits about when they're going to reunify families that were separated under Trump and give them permanent status in the United States, not just the temporary visa, and also when they're going to end those COVID restrictions that I talked about. But of course, from an optics perspective and trying to get critical Republicans off her back, I'm sure the vice president's trip will go a long way in that perspective.
All right. Julia Ainsley, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
Millions of people with felonies now eligible to vote. The problem, most of them don't even know about it. Nicole Lewis, staff writer for the Marshall Project, joins me now. Nicole, you're reporting just a small number of formerly incarcerated people who had their voting rights restored for the 2020 election actually made it onto the voter rolls. What happened?
That's right. And so in a handful of states, we looked at Kentucky, Nevada, New Jersey, and Iowa. And so these are states with really sizable populations that were newly eligible. We found that none of the law changes actually required the Corrections Department, the Probation and Parole Office, the Secretary of State to notify people that their rights had been restored. And much of that work fell on community organizers who were spread thin trying to do voter registration in general in the middle of a pandemic. And so there were just a number of obstacles and hurdles that they had to overcome in order to inform people that they could actually get back on the voter rolls and then vote in the 2020 election.
On top of that, you mentioned, at least 13 states have expanded voting rights for people with felony convictions over the last few years. And not all of them have exactly the same rules, changes, adjustments, right? So it's a little bit confusing for people to figure out whether they're eligible or not. Could you explain that?
That's right. So at least 13 states, in some cases, the states are expanding voting rights to people on probation and parole. In some cases, the states are expanding voting rights to only people who committed certain kinds of crimes, right? So there's no one size fits all legal change. In some cases, they're not even law changes. They're just simply executive orders. And so it's a patchwork of policies, right? Felony disenfranchisement is something that mostly happens at the state level. And so it can be very confusing. In some states, like Iowa, for example, I heard that the state had changed the laws multiple times. And so now this time around, under executive order, people are trying to figure out, well, where are we in this process? Does my conviction count here? But I think overall, nationwide, when we take a look at all of these laws together, it becomes clear that more people are kind of rethinking this connection between disenfranchisement and going to prison. And so that is something that is really changing across the country.
This is something so interesting that you found. A lot of formerly incarcerated people are scared that if they vote, they'll go back to prison. Why is that?
It's because for so long, right, felony disenfranchisement has meant that it is illegal to cast a ballot while you are either on probation or on parole, or in some cases, like Iowa is a great example, if they had a lifetime ban on voting for people with felony convictions. And so these are people who had served their time. They're no longer in prison. They're working. They're paying taxes just like you and I. But because of this felony conviction, they are barred from voting. And so we heard time and again that high-profile cases, like the one out of Texas, a woman named Crystal Mason is actually facing 5 years, right, for voting while under conditional or supervised release, And so it has a huge chilling effect across the country. People hear a story like that in the news and they say, oh my goodness, I'm not going to risk my freedom just to participate in this election.
Sure. I can't blame them for being scared when you read things like that. Organizers are working to get people registered ahead of the 2022 midterms. You've laid out some of the obstacles that we've been seeing. So how are they overcoming them? How are they trying to get some formerly incarcerated folks who are now eligible to vote, able to vote next time around?
So they're really trying to make the case, right, that in these midterms, there are so many people who oversee the justice system. So this could mean district attorneys, it could mean sheriffs, judges who are up for election. And so they're saying to formerly incarcerated people, you have firsthand experience with these systems. Surely you have ideas about how they can be improved, how they can be reformed, how they're not working. This is your opportunity to vote for candidates who represent your needs, whose platforms, whose message really speak to you. And so that's the main pitch that they're trying to really encourage participation. At the same time, they're working to try to overcome some of these hurdles, these structural obstacles. So that could mean, working with the corrections department to do notification, probation officers, making sure they're having those conversations, just finding ways to really strengthen the laws that have changed in those states.
Nicole, it was such a great read and such a fascinating story. I learned so much. Thanks so much for being on with us. It's a really important for us to be more aware here.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
We remember their names, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice. But what about the countless others who end up in emergency rooms after run-ins with police? An NBC News investigation with the Marshall Project takes a closer look at one department's use of force record. Here's NBC News correspondent Gadi Schwartz.
Marissa Santa Cruz and Paya Tukuafu were celebrating Marissa's 22nd birthday at a San Jose hotel when there was a knock on the door. Staff told them to lower their music. The next knock was the police.
San Jose, please open the door.
I'm a big guy, dark too, and just the way how I have my tattoos. Some people can't help but to profile you.
The police told the couple they had to leave. While they were packing, Paya cursed at the officers.
Start packing and let's go, okay? Let me pack.
Then 2 seconds later,
push up and tase this guy. Taser!
The officers used tasers, batons, and a riot gun.
I put myself in between them, and then I was on the floor. All I remember was feeling pain.
Marissa and Paya were taken to the hospital for their injuries. Nationwide, at least 80,000 people are sent to the hospital each year after an interaction with law enforcement or security guards. NBC News found over the past 3 years in San Jose, 43% of use of force incidents ended in a trip to the emergency room.
Are you comfortable with how many people are being hospitalized after use of force incidents?
No, we need to do better. But again, any use of force incident is driven by the noncompliance of the individual that we're trying to detain or arrest.
The San Jose Police Department says the numbers are high because they're doing the right thing, taking people to the hospital for even minor complaints.
Is focus being put on de-escalation as opposed to resorting to use of force?
We're always looking for opportunities to better ourselves. De-escalation, slowing things down, tactical conduct, all these things are basis for how our officers interact with members of the community.
In and of itself, cussing at a police officer is not enough for them to be able to use force.
Bryce Peterson specializes in police use of force. He says across the country, de-escalation will help rebuild trust between communities and the police.
Officers are there to protect and serve. And so when people see the result of that and it results in people being hospitalized or brutalized, it can definitely erode public trust.
Marissa and Paya were not charged and are suing the department. In response to their lawsuit, San Jose police say the use of force was appropriate, reasonable, and constitutionally permissible. Marissa, whose father works in law enforcement, said that night at the hotel has changed how she sees police.
I always did respect police, and I always trusted them with everything because I knew them. I knew a lot of them. And then having this happen firsthand, was the biggest wake-up call.
While Paya, who works as an unarmed security guard, says he always tries to de-escalate with empathy and understanding.
You put yourself in their shoes and you can automatically feel what they're going through.
And despite what happened, he still hopes to fulfill his dream of going into law enforcement. Gotti Schwartz, NBC News, San Jose, California.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.